there. My name is Marla Neufeld, and welcome to the Surrogacy Space. So, on the podcast, we typically talk about all things pertaining to surrogacy, third party reproduction, alternative family building. But of course, people that come to surrogacy and need help building their family, it's a long journey and many times involves hard situations, difficulty getting pregnant, miscarriages, just a lot of hardship. And it's something I personally went through. And today on the show, we have my friend Sherri Levine. So first of all, I want to welcome Sherri today to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Sherri, we're friends, and she told me about a book that she contributed to called Deserts to Mountaintops. And I read the book because, of course, I wanted to support Sherri, but I was just blown away by just the stories, the personal stories. The book is a compilation of different stories from different women that went through different hardships and some great successes, and just a lot of it pertained to family building and challenges growing a family. And of course, it's something that resonates with me personally and to our listeners. And so I thought it'd be really awesome to have Sherri talk about her chapter in the book. So thank you so much for joining us today to chat about your chapter, which in the book is called Full Circle. So just to share and start off with the listeners, I'd love to just share a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What do you do? What's your family like? And just a little intro to who Sherri Levine is.
Yeah, so my name is Sherri Levine, and I was born and raised on the west coast of Florida in St. Petersburg. And now I reside right outside of Sarasota. And I am married for almost 15 years. We're coming up on our 15-year anniversary, and we actually met
Awesome.
on an airplane.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, and so I was in St. Pete. We moved to Jersey for a couple years, and I chased, I left my job in St. Pete, moved to New Jersey, started my PA career. I'm a physician assistant as my background.
Okay.
And we had our first son born in Jersey, and then quickly realized we needed family support and wanted to move back to Florida. So we moved back to Florida. I looked for another job and continued my PA career in the emergency medicine area and urgent care. And
Okay.
then quickly we had two other kids. So I have three boys. The first two are Irish twins, and that's part of my chapter.
Yes.
And then we had our little one, Blake. And so, yeah, I've been happily married. My husband travels though all the time. And ironically, he works for a baby company. So we've been able to sort of use those products, test it out.
Oh,
And now
interesting.
life is just busy with being a mom, still working full time as a PA, and now juggling the kids' schedules as they get older. I think there's just different
Absolutely.
challenges through different phases of life. And a lot of, I think everything that's happened and throughout the story has kind of prepared me to handle, these different phases as they occur and as your kids grow older.
Yeah, and I know we can talk about it soon, but even in your chapter, you talked about like the hardships kind of help support you through the hard parts of parenting because you see that you can't take this for granted necessarily because it's like all a blessing and
Yeah.
so that was an interesting point that you made that I understand. So if you could just explain to our listeners what is Deserts to Mountaintop, because when you first said you wrote, contributed to a book, I didn't know what the book was, and so it'd be great to have just like an overview of what this book is.
Yeah, Deserts to Mountaintops. The Pilgrimage to Motherhood is my volume. That's the book that I was a contributing author for, but it's an anthology series of collection of stories from women. This particular book, there were 22 of us that shared our story with the main author and publisher who wanted to open this book up specifically to help those and discuss motherhood as it's such a huge topic and a part of a lot of our lives, and dealing with the hardships, not just the joy that comes with it. And so I'd never really heard about it either until a friend of mine mentioned it to me, going through my own hardship. And I'm not a writer, I'm creative, but it takes me a long time to sometimes figure out my words and thoughts. And I always have a lot of notes, and I just have to like think about how I'm going to get it out there
Yeah.
tactfully. But I never really thought about being an author. But I think in learning what the book was about and sharing stories about motherhood, it just was something I so felt like passionate about, that if I in any way could share my story and it would help somebody else, why not? So this is
Yeah,
the third
absolutely.
book from Jessica Buchanan, who is the main author and owner of the publishing company. She's Her mission is basically to help women. The previous book was about self-acceptance of your body. The first
Mm.
book she wrote about her own journey, which is incredible. And so she's just compiling these series to account for different aspects of women and their lives, and can it help somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am a big believer in, sharing hard stories does help empower others, and, people can feel so alone and in what we're talking about with challenges of getting pregnant. And it's such a relief to see other women sharing, and I know it's helpful. So I'm really happy to be able to share the book and with the listeners. And if you could just give a little overview of your specific chapter, which is called Full Circle, kind of like generally, I know it's a lot to talk about, but like kind of generally, what did you chat about in your chapter?
Yeah, I think, it is just that title. I think it's, and it evolved. My initial draft got redlined and scratched, and I had to write all over again and do a lot of digging. I think what I initially was focusing on was the hardship of having an ectopic pregnancy and the trauma and the mental, emotional, physical aspects of that. But then it kind of evolved into a lot more because it wasn't just about one situation. It's how I got through it, and I think a lot of the content in there is leading up to how I sort of survived, what I had to lean on, more than just like the physical pain, but there was a lot of emotional healing. And I talk about, not being one to really talk about feelings growing up. And so while this chapter was meant to kind of help other people in terms of recognizing maybe, a medical emergency if they're pregnant, or not realizing they're pregnant and something else might be going on, it turned into a lot of self-healing and diving into emotions and being
Hmm.
okay with it. And so Full Circle is truly a journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance.
And what were some of those mechanisms that you used to help kind of cope through like the ectopic pregnancy, the miscarriage concepts, and how do you recommend someone kind of guide themselves through something like that worked for you?
Yeah, I think everyone has their own strength within. For me, I was a medical professional. I was very aware about medical conditions and what to look for. And I was a realist. Like I knew when I got pregnant, I think, the first hardship was the miscarriage. And, I had this vision of wanting to be a mom ever since I was little. And I think for the first time having that miscarriage set me off track. I couldn't control it, and it put me into an emotional like tailspin of how do I cope with this? No one teaches you how to grieve. It's something you go through. And I think I knew medically it wasn't, I accepted why it happened medically. I knew it was common. I knew, my sister, had a miscarriage. I didn't know much about it because I was younger when it
Yeah.
happened to her. But I think sometimes you just think things can't happen to you. But I very well
Mm.
wanted to be excited about being pregnant and taking that first pregnancy test. But I was very cautious. And I think I protected myself with some walls of, maybe it was my defense mechanism of I'm excited, but I'm going to hold back a little bit until I know everything's okay. Like I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment or it, if we got to the ultrasound and it wasn't viable, or if genetic blood tests came back and something was wrong. I think I wanted to be excited, but I was guarded. And
Yeah,
that
I mean,
was
you
my,
you almost like know too much as a medical
yeah.
professional.
And so it was like it was a strength and a weakness at the same time. Like I was able to sort of separate, okay, this is medically happening to me. I know why, but then I had to understand the emotional aspect of it. And I didn't know how, to be honest. I mean, I think the
Mhm.
only thing I got through it is I was distracted. I just kept working. I just said,
Yeah.
okay, let's keep going. And that's my motto, throughout the chapter. But let me keep going. I'm gonna show up. I realized I had this emotional wound that I was carrying, but I still very much had a job, a career I loved. And I recognized I still had a family who cared about me, but I also wasn't very open. I was more of a private person. So I think the only person that really, knew was my husband. And And then I
Right.
told my mom about it. And then later a coworker, because I had to, call out for my shifts.
Yeah.
And
It's a
typically I
lot to
couldn't.
walk around with day to day, holding that in, you know?
Yeah, and I think that was also part of it was the story, the chapter was almost going to be called, there are two sides of the story and both are mine.
Ah,
Be- because it was a journey about how I am a healthcare provider, but I'm also, I'm trying to become this mother, and I'm just like, the rest of women who want to have that special time in their life. And so I had to sort of act as a provider, but I also had to act as the patient. And there were two sides. And I think that a lot of times when you go to see people in healthcare, we all sometimes have these walls up, but like we internally have our own issues, going on as well. And you just have to like keep forcing these thoughts down because you have to do your job and show up for everybody.
yes, absolutely. And I thought it was really helpful and important that you talked about, even you went through a miscarriage, had a child, and you still had kind of hardships. Like, I don't know if you would classify it as like postpartum or prepartum, peripartum depression. Like it's not just over once the miscarriage happened. So I thought that was really helpful that you spoke about that as well, because it's such a common thing.
I think, looking back, and like I said, it was a very therapeutic experience and benefit to actually write this chapter. Like I knew my story may help somebody else, and that's my passion, is to help others first and foremost. But I didn't realize how writing this chapter would be therapeutic for me,
Mm,
because that miscarriage, I think, set the tone that like, okay, things can happen. Like, my life may not be on track and how I want it to happen. And it was the first time I learned that I don't have control over everything. And that was
mm.
hard for me to learn too. And sort of, I think, set me up to understand and sort of expect that things can happen and how am I going to navigate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was great. A really helpful read, I think that a lot of people will sympathize with. And I was curious because you talked about, a miscarriage pre having kids and then the scary experience of the ectopic pregnancy while you had kids. Like, is there a difference emotionally in how those two things felt, knowing that something happened before you had any kids and then something happened when you were like a mom, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the whole full circle part of it, is that, my entrance into motherhood started with trauma and then put this emotional strain on me. And sort of the end of my motherhood journey and having kids ended with this horrific physical trauma. So I've experienced, I think, all the spectrums of, losing a pregnancy early on, having kids and then having an unexpected pregnancy and navigating the toll of that. While I realized it was a blessing and a joy and I was grateful for it, it, it was hard, and it created a lot of feelings that I recognize them as, okay, they're thoughts. I was going through the process, but I didn't want to admit to anybody those thoughts because I knew the implication. Like if I had actually said that I'm not sure I deserve to be a mother, or if I wanted to, jump off the bridge, like I knew what would happen if I had disclosed that. And I said, okay, I'm not going to act on it. These are my thoughts, and I'm in their emotions, and maybe it's hormones. But
Hmm.
I think if it had been early on in the pregnancy, I would have gotten help. But I think as a provider, we just think we can do everything. We can treat ourselves. We have to be strong. And I
Right.
knew I was going to be okay. I just had to get through those thoughts and accepting that sometimes we have these intrusive thoughts. But like, are they just a thought and I'm not going to act on it? Or is there a more serious underlying issue? And so I think when I had the ectopic pregnancy, I very well knew this is a physical emergency. I need help. And I think it was a different kind of pain. Like I realized I was about to lose my life if I didn't call for help.
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
and I was alone. So that was, very scary. So that's the whole part of, some women don't know they're pregnant um, until they're 6 to 8 weeks along. And other women, I think with fertility, know it. And the minute that they're supposed to get a period and they miss it, they know they're pregnant.
Right.
Um,
But not all women are necessarily so vigilant or trying like that actively, Like you
yeah,
just
because
never
there's a
know.
lot of things that, that can mimic. I mean, I was like, am I having appendicitis? Do I have
Mm,
another ruptured ovarian cyst? Because I've had those all my life. And that was something I didn't know if I'd be able to get pregnant, which is something I didn't put in the book because there's only so many words I could write in the chapter. But like I dealt with, potentially I didn't know if I'd be able to get pregnant because I had ruptured cysts pretty much growing up through when I was a teenager
Mm.
and into early adulthood. So it was just more of an awareness, like you are trying to get to this point where like the end goal is motherhood, but there's so many things that can happen. And while you want to hold on to hope and you want to be optimistic, I think I was a realist in knowing things could happen. I didn't get to share this in the book either, but there was a point in the chapter where I kind of said it wasn't meant to be, it happened for a reason. And yes, it was traumatic. And it was the end of my motherhood journey. Like the universe told me I wasn't going to have a fourth child, and I was okay with that. We had tried previously after Blake to have another kid, but it didn't pan out. And so I dealt with, I think, they call it secondary infertility.
Mm.
And at that point we were okay. We said if we can have another kid, we'd be blessed, but it didn't work in our favor. And that's when the ectopic pregnancy happened. I was shocked that,
Mm.
as a woman, like you want something so badly, sometimes we put pressure on ourselves, there's stress. And how do you calm yourself down from wanting something so bad? And people are like, try acupuncture. And I just kind of thought, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, even if I do everything medically right. Um,
Mm.
if it's supposed to happen, it's going to happen. And so I think when it
Right.
didn't, we had closed that chapter. And then this ectopic pregnancy, I found out I was pregnant. And then a week later, immediately I was, on the floor in my bathroom, slowly
Right.
becoming in
By
shock.
yourself.
And so I think that's kind of, I didn't get a chance to really talk about that so much, but that was sort of the accumulation of, okay, someone's telling me this is not happening, and they're making me go through this trauma knowing that I'll be okay. Knowing that, I know how to get myself out of it, that I can handle the physical aspect, but I wasn't really prepared for the emotional aspect afterwards either.
Yeah, it's something that you almost can't anticipate or expect. And it's just an emotional roller coaster, truly. It's just hard to put into words and you found a way to put it into words in your chapter.
Well, I think
Um,
that's kind of just that, like fertility is a unique journey for everybody, no matter if you're in the beginning, the middle, or if you're at the end of your fertility and wanting to say, okay, I'm done. I've achieved this. I've had my kids, or if I can't have kids, is there another greater adventure out there for me? But
mm,
it's a roller coaster and balance of, you've got to be patient. Um, and then it leads to like anxiety and stress. And it's kind of like this up and down, like how much can you take of everything?
yeah, it really can be all consuming. And it's interesting with the secondary infertility. I represent a lot of parents who pursue surrogacy to have a second or even third child. And sometimes there's feelings of guilt or judgment that, is this really fair? I already have a kid. But I
Yeah.
mean, everyone's entitled to the family they envision. So there should be no stigma or feeling bad about pursuing other kids when, there's a hardship after the first. So it was nice that you spoke about that too, because it's not always just for the first kid. It can come in like your big plan of what you foresee as your family, what you want it to be or think it should be.
Yeah, and I
So,
definitely had those feelings. And through everything, I think I've learned, to be like, I'm always grateful, but I think sometimes like you can have that in the background, but you still have to be true to your emotions and act on them and be able to feel them
mm,
in the process. And I think one of the things that did get me through a lot of those difficult times was, as I've gotten older, my circle of close friends has gotten smaller. People that I like to lean on, that are my
mm,
confidence, that are my inner circle of trust. Like I have that now. In the beginning, when I
yeah,
had my miscarriage, I don't think I did. Um, and so having that now at the end, you know, 10 years later, you grow as a person, you mature, and you realize that certain things that maybe were important to you back then are not anymore. And you close in and you hone in on that. And so
right.
I leaned
Like,
heavily onto a couple friends, and thank God for them. And one of them, is Jess, as you know as well.
yeah,
So I think one of the biggest things too is, besides your partner, um, in your journey to fertility, like you need to have like a handful of support. And I don't think maybe people mention that. Like, I don't know if it's counseled upon, like when you start, your journey to motherhood. And I know it's not, but like if you're specifically going into fertility and you're looking to have a child, like, to have therapy, counseling, someone be real with you, like this is going to be emotional. Who are your support
absolutely.
people, other than the actual provider, I think there needs to be this kind of checklist, like, of people that you're ready to turn to, like when things maybe don't go your way, and when you experience an unexpected hardship, or people to share with when you're
Yeah.
really excited. And I think that's something that is so valuable. And I hope that everybody, in their fertility journey has that support.
That's really, really great advice. Like think of who your kind of tribe or village is and who you trust, because not everybody has the sympathy to kind of give the right advice. And even though they're well-meaning, it could strike you the wrong way. So you have to kind of know who to go to that understands and that you feel comfortable speaking to.
And I think that's a huge point too. You need to open up and talk. And
Mhm.
your person may not have the best words for you. And honestly, maybe they have no words, and that's all you need. You just need someone
Yes.
to listen, hold your hand, accept you for who you are, what you're feeling without judgment, and just be there for you. And oftentimes I feel like, even at least for me, I was very closed as a child. I never really talked about feelings. And I said that in the chapter, but as I've gotten older, I've learned how important it is. And just to have someone listen. They don't have to
Yeah.
say anything. Just
Right. Sometimes not saying anything is better than saying something.
and I found sometimes, like, I am that person for a lot of people, when I see them in the urgent care, and maybe they're coming in for something medically, but emotionally maybe they look a little, sad, and I'll ask them, is there anything else, that you have a concern about today? And sometimes they open up to me, and even though I'm
Mm.
technically a stranger to them, in four walls of that, 10-minute visit, sometimes being able to talk and letting it out in that moment when you don't even anticipate it, like, helps.
Oh,
So
that's so nice.
I think, even if you're, when you have these emotions and you're really trying to keep your walls up and you're trying not to fall apart, it might be the person in the grocery line where, you just feel like saying
Let
something
it
to,
go.
even like one sentence, just saying you have a bad day, or like you're not feeling well, or like, sometimes just getting it out helps in whatever
Mhm.
capacity that looks like.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome to hear. And your patients are lucky to have you as their provider, because the fact that you're thinking about not just their medical needs, but like emotional, it's a whole package. So I think that's really cool that you're helping in that way as well.
Well, and that's a whole nother, it's a whole nother
Yeah.
topic.
Whole other discussion. In the chapter, you had a theme, with a theme song in a sense that kind of led you, as the Taylor Swift song, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. And I was just curious, like, why was that your mantra? How does that apply to this particular story?
Um, so I think I I don't know how to call myself a Swiftie, but as I've listened to her lyrics, and as I've gotten older, I can appreciate them and the truth behind them. And I think she says a lot of things for a lot of people.
Hmm.
And so when I heard that song, it kind of just it spoke to me. It's like I think a song about resilience and strength. And we all have these emotional wounds that we carry. And I think it's okay to have these wounds, and you can still go on with your life, and you can live and you can love, knowing you have this emotional wound. Um, and that's okay. And just keep going to show
Yeah.
up. And to be vulnerable, you know, to say, like, yes, I have a broken heart, but I can keep going on. Like, I can
Hmm.
find the strength, despite everything that's happened. And so I think it's just this proclamation that, yeah, everybody has their stuff that they're going through, and that's okay. You still have something to look forward to, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. You start to recognize other great things in your life to put your
Yeah.
attention to, but it's to show up but not ignore what you've been through.
Such great advice, and something family building, advice to your kids, advice to others. Just, it's a really great thing to keep in mind, to think about. We're only human, and not everything's going to be as cookie cutter as we may imagine. And it's just really helpful to hear these words. And I'm glad that song helped you, kind of have that message.
Yeah. And it's I love the part where it's like, I'm so upset, and act like it's like my birthday. And it's so
Mm.
true. It's like, you kind of keep going, like, you're hurting on the inside, but just show up and smile like it's my birthday.
Yeah, right,
To make,
exactly.
you know, I think it's hard. You don't want to like necessarily display that you're emotional wreck on the outside. Um, but like it's okay to feel that internally. And it's like if you do need to let it out, you open up about it. There's no, like I said, being vulnerable is the best thing I could have done for this book. And that's how it evolved so much, is because I decided at this point in my life, like I have my career, I have my kids, I have my great friends, there's no more judgment. Like I'm not worried about who's judging me.
Right.
And so I just kind of felt comfortable to finally just say, hey, this is me and I'm good with it. And
Very cool.
ready to sort of dive into that, which is something I don't think I would have been ready, you know, in my early motherhood
Yeah,
journey, I
I
would
mean,
say.
clearly it was a path to being able to share that. And I mean, it was hard to read. A lot of the chapters are hard to read, but they're just so inspiring. And just it kind of makes you feel part of like a community of that this isn't always so easy and everyone has different stories. And so thank you for sharing your chapter and thank you for coming on the show to talk about it. I know it's not easy in general, but you're not alone in that, what you went through. And I think it'll help a lot of people who hear your story and the other women in the book.
Well, and I think that is truly key. It's a sense of, it's going to give everybody a sense of community and to not feel alone. Like being lonely is a horrible place and feeling. And so these books and what Jessica Buchanan has done is give women a space to belong and to be accepted without judgment and to hear stories from all walks of life, all ages.
Yeah.
And even women that aren't mothering, but mother in other ways. Like there was a chapter about a therapist who mothered her patients. She wasn't able to have kids, and what that looks like. So I was, definitely grateful to be a part of it, so that nobody hopefully ever feels alone.
It's awesome. And where can people find the book and resources that pertain to the book? I wasn't sure if she had podcasts. I thought I saw other outlets as well.
She does have podcasts. I believe it's called In Her Words.
Okay.
And all of us talk about our chapter as well with her in a one-on-one. The book is
Yeah.
sold on Amazon. There is an ebook. I believe the audiobook is coming out.
Oh, cool.
Certain
Are you going to
certain
read your
bookstores.
chapter?
I did read it. I did.
Oh, awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I made it through miraculously reading it. I thought it might take 5 hours and several boxes of tissues, but I did make it
Yes.
through reading it.
Oh, that's
So yeah, there's
awesome.
an ebook coming out, and then other bookstores. I believe Barnes and Noble has it, and if your local bookstore does not have it, you can always request it.
Hmm.
But for the most part, Amazon, or if you connect with one of the authors, we are happy to send you a copy as well. So we all
Oh,
have
awesome.
a bunch of copies of books that we are happy to distribute.
Thank you. Well, we will be happy to share more information on Deserts to Mountaintops within the show notes so people can check it out. And is there any other resources that you have that you share, like social media handles or anything else that, that you'd like to share? We'd be happy to put it within the show notes as well. So people, if they have any questions or just feedback, we really appreciate you being on the show and just want to help support you and your book so much.
Thank you. I mean, it means the world
Me
to
too.
have you be a part of our community. But if anyone wants to specifically get in touch with me or anybody else in the book, at the end of every chapter, everybody has their contact information. I
Cool.
just use Instagram. So it's at Sherri, SherriPac. And I'm happy to answer questions or, even be a sounding voice. To walk them through any of these challenges if I faced it and they faced it and they want someone to open up to.
Such a gift. That's so nice. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure. And I hope your book reaches so many people to help them. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Take care, Sherri.
Thank you.